Hello and excuse me. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Empower Hour podcast. I'm your host, Lee Mitchell, and I'm here with Vinita Mongia, who will be discussing how to be a confident leader. And we are going to talk about burnout, about how to be engaged while also really focusing on our well-being. So being an engaged leader where we are serving others, but also serving our own needs. And I think sometimes leaders don't serve their own needs enough, and that's how they become burned out. So welcome, Vinita. So excited to have you on today. Uh, Vinita, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you are now into this new area of work.
Thanks, Lee. So happy to be here and thank you for the invitation. I am a recently retired elementary principal and I've had my entire career in public education with Peel District School Board and had a really fulfilling career as an early childhood educator, as an educator in the early years, special education, resource teaching, and found my way into the leadership journey as vice principal and then ended my career as a principal and never would have imagined that I would have taken an earlier retirement, and I never really would have imagined myself as an entrepreneur. So I'm definitely in a pivot, and I'm really enjoying the new journey that this you know turn in my path has taken, and part of it means getting to meet new people and such as yourself and being here in this space, hopefully inspiring others.
Well, there's no doubt that you will inspire others. You've certainly inspired me. We've had many conversations over the past, well, gosh, it's going to be a year that we've known each
Mm,
other in September. So it's hard to believe that almost a year has gone by, and so many things have happened in your life and mine as well.
mhm.
So maybe you could just give us a little breakdown on what led you into your work as a leadership coach and mentor, leadership.
Yeah, so I guess part of this journey, and like many people's journey, starts with personal life experiences where life takes you on a new path or a new turn, something that you may not have been expecting. And so my very real journey that I'm happy to share with our audience here today and with colleagues is that I did find myself into that space of burnout. I call myself a high achieving leader. I was extremely passionate about my work, extremely dedicated to my leadership and my community that I served as a principal. And the journey to burnout happened kind of slow and steady over the years. In fact, the more experienced I became, the more burnt out I became, which seems kind of counterintuitive.
Mm.
And you don't really realize that you're in that path until you are kind of stopped in your tracks and you need to kind of take a break. So I found myself on a break and I was feeling really good about feeling rested and taking the time to prioritize my health and well-being. And in my journey to prepare to go back to work, I had to take another leave because of a random injury that kept me away from work. And that was a bit of a significant journey for me because I thought I was ready to go back in September when the school year started, and this injury kept me away, and the wave of stress hit me really hard,
Mm.
unexpectedly aligned with the start of the school year, and I began to really recognize that I may have rested and had some time away from the job, but I actually didn't address the burnout and I didn't address the things that were actually kind of triggering. So I decided to, really looked closely at what those things were and kind of did a deep dive on learning and well-being. And in that journey, recognize that I need to share this journey with my principal colleagues
Mhm.
because I'm if I'm feeling this way, then sure enough, there's got to be lots of colleagues that are feeling the same way. It's a really isolating role. You're kind of lonely at the top in the school setting, and I recognize that school leaders are very similar to leaders in all industries that may find themselves alone in their job,
Mhm.
high achieving, highly dedicated, and have high expectations for oneself.
Mhm.
And those tendencies can kind of get you to where I landed. So, as I was working on my journey to kind of address the burnout and address the work related things that were causing the stress that they were causing, I recognized that there's another layer of learning that if I take this learning journey, I can actually then become, a leader within my community. So I embarked upon that idea. It was
Mhm.
kind of that spark, that um, idea baby. And I thought, okay, this is something I want to run with. So I started working with a leadership coach. And while I was preparing for my own return to work journey, I was also preparing how can I document this journey
Mhm.
and be able to kind of share it with colleagues. So that's what I did. I transitioned back to work for a brief amount of time, and just decided that what I think there's enough messages coming my way that it's time to make a formal exit plan and embark upon this idea baby. So that's how it all started.
Wow, that's a really interesting journey that you describe. How how did you finally end up taking that leap, like, in terms of, I mean, it must have been a hard decision to make. So, what were some of the criteria that finally led you to, make that exit?
So you're absolutely right. It was a really slow, steady, long decision-making process where I gave myself time and permission to have time to be able to not make a rash decision
Mhm.
and one that I wouldn't regret. And so I think having done all the work that I had done and all the reflecting that I had done and all of the draw that I had to take this next step, I recognize that unless I made a formal exit plan,
Mhm.
I wouldn't be able to engage in the speaking engagements that were coming my way.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be able to continue to work in an occasional capacity as a principal, and I wouldn't really be fully free to actually put my heart and soul into this new chapter. So, and that's exactly what happened. Once I made a decision, I was shocked at how much creative space opened up for me. I'll give you one example. I think you and I were dialoguing at the time. I was trying to come up with my brand logo and my brand, like who am I and what am I going to be called and how am I going to put myself out there into the world. And I had lots of great ideas, but they weren't really quite jumping at me and saying, "Oh my gosh, this is it." And it all kind of came together once I knew I was retiring and I knew that I was going to be embarking upon new opportunities. The creative juices just kind of came flowing through and it just kind of kept snowballing. Opportunities were coming my way, and so it's just all kind of felt like, okay, I've made the right decision. And it's a slow, steady journey.
Mhm.
And I knew that I was a really hard working person, and I knew that I just take that dedication and energy and put it toward my brand and my real desire to reach out to school leaders. And by virtue of this opportunity, I think we're going to be reaching beyond, the scope of school leaders and just looking at leaders in general.
Mhm.
But I recognize the impact on a school community when a leader needs to take time away. And if I can make a difference in supporting the education system and school boards and school leaders, then there is a ripple effect to many communities.
Yeah, that is so true. So, if you were discussing, your story with another principal that maybe is considering the same trajectory as yourself, what advice would you give them?
I would really start slow and steady by paying attention to all the cues that your body and your mind are giving you first and foremost. So if you're starting to not feel well, if you're starting to not feel joy in the job, if you're starting to question your leadership capabilities and your even your confidence in your job, all of the things that maybe, you hadn't ever had to address before, those little signals and signs, you need to start really paying attention to those, and then paying attention to the cues and the messages that your family and close friends are also sharing with you because they know. I
Mhm,
would live, eat, sleep, breathe school with joy even when the job was hard.
mhm,
And my family and close friends all knew that about me, and while I know it wasn't the healthiest way, I had internal joy and satisfaction until I didn't.
mm,
Until I didn't, and the narrative became negative, and it became taxing, and it was taking a toll on my mental health, my physical health, just the tone. I mean, I look back at what I looked like when I would enter the home and literally the baggage, like, you come in with all your
mhm,
bags, and then you're unleashing the kind of, like, the trials and tribulations of the day, and it's just it wasn't a nice way to be, and I used to come home with, "Oh my goodness, you're not gonna believe what happened today," and, like, all these great stories and hard stories and heartfelt stories. But there was always this internal drive and motivation that I couldn't turn off.
mm.
And that slowly shifted, and in the context of things, this was also during the COVID years. You know, you're opening a school during COVID, and you feel like you're turning a school into a hospital. You're running a school in a very different way than what kids and families and communities and educators are used to. And you're opening and you're closing, and you're opening and you're closing, and you're trying to keep it all together for the sake of your community. And in the end, I was just becoming more and more depleted. And
Mm,
luckily had a really supportive family and really supportive um, friends. And I tapped into my healthcare professionals, and they were also extremely supportive. So even if you don't know, the people around you, they know. And so the advice I would give is to pay attention
mm.
to what, the voice inside of your head and the voices outside of your head.
That's good. So did other people, you allude to the fact that other people let you know. So were there people that you trusted to tell you that perhaps you're onto something with this idea to leave?
I trusted myself for that, to be honest.
Mhm,
Like, to make that decision, I did the real it was, it's my career, it's my journey, it's my passion, and I never really thought I would ever even wanna leave, let alone leave early. So,
mhm,
that was a huge sign for me that I knew that I needed to pay attention. And, there are other ways to lead and serve,
mhm,
where you can have a really, positive contributing role in your community and in families and in the lives of children. And I just have to, you know, trust in that. And I've been actually, acting upon that as well. So a huge part of my journey was, okay, well, if I leave a formal school setting, I can still be involved on an occasional way. I can
mm,
contribute to local charities that support women and children. I can be of service by speaking engagements and connecting, with principal colleagues or in connecting with people such as yourself, right?
Right.
And just get the word out there that you have to really pay attention to your health and well-being. And no job will, you have to take care of yourself. The job isn't going to take care of you. And
Mm.
you can't really serve well if you are not well yourself. And as leaders, and I think particularly as female leaders, we tend to want to take care of everyone. And in my case, you're taking care of your kids in your community and your staff and your parents and, representing, your school at at the board level and at the provincial level, and you want to serve. And if you're not taking care of yourself, then, you're really not going to be that great to your community. In my case, having to step away multiple times from my school created ripple effects within the school community. And um, anytime I go back for visits, you're just met with so much support and love and appreciation. And, you have to remember, like, your impact, has been made. And, you want the school to be in a good place, and you want the school to be able to move forward, and they need strong leaders.
Mhm.
And you know, I wanna be able to support leaders who are maybe feeling that they're not at their best, to be able to kind of regain that confidence and regain the trust in their leadership,
Mhm.
and kind of adopt maybe the framework that I've kind of created for myself that I'm, sharing, to be able to, maybe, I've contextualized it to the context of a principal so that they can see themselves in this journey, and hopefully people outside of the school leadership role can as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into the calm confident framework, tell me what advice would you give to education employers, HR departments, the executive leaders that are supporting principals and educators? What could they be doing to support someone like yourself better? Because
Mhm,
you're not alone. There is a mass exodus of retirements and people thinking whether this was the best work for them under the amount of pressure that many educators are, because education has changed so much
mhm,
since the last 5-10 years, and then of course the pandemic really exacerbated all of that. So
mhm.
yeah, so what advice would you give
I
leaders?
guess the advice that I would give that I wish I had for myself at the time was time and space for real conversations related to something as simple as, how are you feeling and doing in this job? How are you? And while resources are plentiful and shared through links and, access to resources, I think the power in having real conversations in real time with school leaders about the realities of the changing landscape of the job and the changing role and demands of the job
Mhm,
will have a significant impact on school leaders. Being able to have time and space for dialogue. So when I'm now taking my workshops and presentations and presenting them to principals, when the superintendent is sitting among their team and participating in this presentation, and the principals are sharing their realities and some of you know, the things that they are being triggered by or things that they are struggling with. And they know that their immediate supervisor is prioritizing their health and well-being by taking time to have, conversations and being able to have strategies shared with them. And just like an understanding that it is not the same as what it was pre-pandemic. There's been so many things that have changed. And, being able to just honor that we want to serve and lead to the best capacity that we can. And we may need, time built in for our health and well-being. Just like we're building it in for our students and our staff and our parent communities, school leaders need it as well in real time. There is a lot of research that's being done on principal well-being, which is fantastic. It's really, really important. I'm taking that research and I'm sharing it. They're so busy, they're not reading the research, but the recommendations are all really important. And taking time to actually have conversations with school leaders to say, we want to talk about it. We want to talk about the research. We want to talk about strategies and lean in to some of the recommendations so that we keep you in our schools, we keep you well, and we keep the great work that's happening in schools moving forward.
Wow. So, was there any particular research that you came across that you think would be significant and helpful for our viewers?
Absolutely. That the research. So the interesting journey for myself was that um, as I was reflecting on how can I share my journey in a succinct way, as I think I was preparing for some speaking engagements, and I was preparing proposals, and I thought, I should really go back and see what research actually supports my journey. And in so doing, I came across some recent research that was conducted and supported through University of Western and UBC. There was a partnership that was supported by Ontario Principals Council, and there was a social services ministry that was also supporting this research. And I remember completing the survey for this research. Ironically, I remembered as I was reading it, and I thought, "Oh, I remember completing this survey, and I knew how important it was." So, I came across that research. It was completed in 2019, and I read, all the reports. I read all the recommendations, and I thought, "Well, this is interesting," because I've come at it like from a personal story, and I think, "Okay, what were all the things that I have been doing to address the burnout and address the things that were triggering and then address and plan for new ways of leading?" And everything that I was doing was recommended through the research. So I thought, okay, well, this is great. How can I now just compartmentalize that in a way that would resonate with school leaders? And so that's what I've done. And I was recently able to speak at the Canadian Association of Principals. There was a conference in Toronto at the end of April, and it was wonderful because it was um, an opportunity to speak to principals from across the country.
Mm.
And at that conference, the researchers that I had connected with were sharing how they were doing more research moving forward. And so that is giving me hope that there is continued awareness that this research needs to happen. And it's not just Ontario, it's all the provinces are looking at what's happening in our schools and how can we support school leaders. And so while the research is really important, what needs to happen is we need to be able to have real conversations in real time with school leaders throughout the course of the school year, and
Mm.
to be able to get creative and innovative with how we can put some like supports in place, just in time supports in place for school leaders. And one of the things that is a little bit interesting, or maybe I'm not sure how this works outside of the school context, but when you become a vice principal or principal, you are promoted from a role of a teacher. And so there's a lot of the business side of being a leader that becomes very new. And with
Mm,
that, tools and strategies, even if it's technology tools or management tools, that suddenly you're kind of like a business leader, right? You're like a CEO of a company when you're running a school. And I think in the business world, people kind of get those skills slow and steady over the trajectory of their career.
mhm.
And so I think school leaders, they could benefit from rethinking productivity, rethinking delegation, rethinking time management from a kind of more of a business leader context rather than always from the context of running a school and being a teacher and being an educator. And
That's so true. Yeah. Wow. I love that you mentioned that because uh my brother is a doctor, and we were talking about, with when you have a role like that, you're taught how to do medicine, but you're not taught how to like figure out all of the business side of like opening up your own practice.
right, right,
Right?
right.
So that's a really interesting observation.
Right, and so these are some of the things that I've been able to kind of reflect upon through the workshop series that I've created and through, um, just all of the people such as yourself that I've come across who we're in different and overlapping fields, and we have had similar journeys, and through those journeys, I've shared resources, you shared resources that have, like, built my confidence in actually being comfortable talking about burnout because
Mhm.
it's not for lack of being an outstanding leader.
Mhm.
It's almost because of it that
Mhm.
you find yourself. And so if I could do a do-over, I wish I had implemented all of these strategies sooner,
Mm.
right? And so I may have waited too long, but I'm hoping that I can be that voice that gets out there in front of leaders to say, there is another way to manage this job in the context of school because I think educators and school leaders, you know, it's so the job is just so unique to the context of the work that we do. So
Mhm.
it's hard to kind of have other people relate to your work and similar to healthcare or similar to other professions, right?
Mhm.
This is all I know. I know education and I know it well and I know the context of the school and the school leader. And I know that there are other ways that we can lead with a healthier balance for ourselves and for the communities that we serve, right?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're in a great position to really inspire and encourage and help people take action for these important areas to give us more happiness in the work that we do, and to do it more productively.
Mhm.
So sorry, I'm just checking to make sure my thing's plugged in. It is. Okay. I got the battery notice up on my computer, so I'm just making sure everything is working properly.
But I love that battery notice because you know
Yeah.
what? We need to take charge of our own battery when
Yes.
we're in our working world context. And so, if you're trying to do your job that you're used to operating at 90%, but your battery's at 10%, you're trying to do 90% with only 10% battery, right?
Mhm. Good.
And
Yeah.
at that point, going on low battery mode really isn't gonna get you much, right?
Yeah.
We've waited too long, right, to
Mhm.
actually learn to to do it differently, and that was for sure my case. I waited and I had 4 months of just resting and rejuvenating, and I thought that that was enough,
Mm.
but I rested the burnout, but I didn't address it.
You rested it, but you didn't address it. That's
That's right.
that's a good one. I like
Yeah,
that.
it's a good
Yeah.
one.
That's probably a good segue into what calm confident means to you. So tell us about the framework.
Okay, so I love the word calm. It is my word. Anyone who knows me, not that I'm always calm, but it's something that is, that those the spaces that I create, the vibe, that's my vibe, so to speak. But when I was creating my branding and my business, I didn't want it to be calm. I thought I have to bring it in a different way. And so I just loved the word confident because I created this idea of like, if I love this word so much and I need to somehow bring that to the forefront, how can I create a framework with that word? And so that's what I did. So my kind of my brand is really about confident leadership. And so the calm is an acronym for four aspects of or four areas of resilience that I believe people can tap into. Specifically, what I loved about this is that, as I was sharing with you, when I looked at all of the things that I did to address doing the job differently, that aligned with what the research and the recommendations were. I thought, okay, how can I fit that into something that's me? And that's where the confident leadership came from. So the C is the importance of to connect and collaborate, to cultivate support networks. And
Okay.
so, whatever leadership context you find yourself in, it can be very lonely. And so, where there may be teams and there may be committees, that is not necessarily the same as having and cultivating a support network. So one of the things that I found for myself, I happen to be in a school that's a single admin school, so you don't have a vice principal. It's yourself and an office manager, and then your staff. So you're really truly alone, kind of running this school, and it's extremely lonely and it's hard. And so I reached out to colleagues and said, "Listen, I'm struggling to kind of keep all of the balls in the air. Can we set up a once a week meeting where we are all just checking in with each other, making sure we're not missing anything, talking about the deadline or the memo, or maybe I've missed something, or just knowing that there are people out there that are living your story."
Mhm.
And, so that was sort of at the beginning of that whole cultivating a community of support for myself. And I think in any role, finding people that can be your lifeline, your support,
Mhm.
your network, where you can just call at any time and say, like, "I need help, you know, please, like, can we connect?" And with that, I would say engaging and cultivating support from your family is so important as well. Like telling them like you're not feeling or doing so great. You might be feeling stress, or how can we work together to kind of alleviate this phase so that, they're aware of what you're going through and that you can lean in to
Mhm.
support as part of your community of support. And with that, I would also say engaging your healthcare professionals, which, I'm so grateful that I had an amazing team. I was dealing with some crazy physio stuff, that due to an injury. And so all of it was kind of interconnected.
Mhm.
And so that importance of, again, cultivating that community of support.
Mhm.
And like I said, that could be colleagues, it could be outside of the work scope, but having a support.
Mhm. Yeah,
Uh,
so important.
and I think in the context of my journey, there's a real understanding that principals are very lonely in that role. And
Mhm.
so that was a really strong recommendation, is to be able to kind of tap in at your, board level, association level, whatever level you can to access supports. And then the A is what I call the attitude of gratitude and grace to create positive thinking patterns.
Okay.
And so you and I have shared many conversations about amazing resources. And just as one particular example, I had many people share the same resource recommendation. So I thought, okay, this must mean something. And one of them was called the 5 Minute Journal.
Oh,
And
yes.
right. And just that daily practice of reading quotes, practicing gratitude, of just writing every single day what you're grateful for and what's going to make for a good day, and setting a positive intention for the day,
Mm.
and then being able to reflect at the end of the day on all that was good. And that one resource alone really opened my eyes as to the things that I was so grateful for while I was taking time to kind of, catch my breath.
Mhm.
And again, in the context of leading during COVID and all that was happening at that time, I think a lot of my colleagues and I had lost our positivity, had lost hope, had lost faith in systems. Um, and we had become quite disillusioned, and it was hard, right? Like, you're trying to have 4-year-olds be masked and distanced in school, and you're like, "Oh my god." In a play-based learning program, like,
Mhm.
everything just we were struggling with so many of the realities that we were facing, and, just so much that was happening. You've got people that were really scared, lots of people that were really scared, and you were trying to kinda hold it all together for them, right? So,
Mhm.
that shift in thinking pattern really, really was something that my colleagues and I started to notice and started to, like, intentionally make some changes, with, and just learning how to reframe, like, learning how to reframe things, doing the work around, um, being positive, catching your words, catching how you're connecting and talking to colleagues, um, and really being intentional around that. And that is something that I think, if we listen to how many times in a day we're complaining, it might surprise us, right?
Oof, yes, I'm sure.
And so then we get to the L, which was leaning into new learning for personal and professional growth. And this is where, I went into a lot of the things related to productivity. So I had to relearn how to manage email and information overload.
Okay.
So I'm not a Microsoft Outlook expert. It's not a tool that I used from a business savvy perspective. For me, it was
Mhm.
just email. And so the more I was learning, the more I realized how inefficient it was, the way I was using it, how I can create more efficient systems. There's just so much information that was coming to us it was a new way of leading. And the fear of missing information or not having it at my fingertips, just not being able to access information efficiently, was a trigger and was significantly stressful. So,
Mm.
um, just learning new digital tools, learning how to create calm, learning new time management strategies, learning a term that I had heard, which was called return on it, ROA. What's
Mhm.
your return on attention?
Hmm.
How can I rethink where and when I'm putting my time and attention to something in the context of the school setting? So, to give an example, well, you'll often hear about setting work hours or setting, do not disturb hours. And a principal will be like, "Well, I'm a principal of a school. There's no way." Well, there are ways. They may be different than a business setting, but there are ways that we can rethink the day, the calendar, delegation, what what is, from a triage perspective.
Mhm.
Not everything is a life or death emergency. It might be to someone else, but how can we kind of bring that medical mindset around triaging into our school setting? And
Mhm.
a lot of principals will talk about, all the interruptions, like you're trying to do something, and then it's like, "Oh, Vanita, do you have a minute? Do you have a minute? Do you have a minute?" There are ways that we can rethink that, and you know that you're an educator as well, but there
Yeah.
are ways that we can rethink that, and
Yeah.
that's some of the learning that I think we need to be open to, and give some thought to how we can, approach it differently. Did I lose you, Lee? I think I don't see you there, but maybe you're here still. I'm just going to continue with the last one, just in the event that there's a little bit of a technical issue. The last one is mindful measures for stress management. And so that area was really just focused on like looking at like renewed habits, routines, creating calm physical spaces in our environment, creating different boundaries, um, creating a new mindset for Sundays. We often talk about, the sun that yucky feeling on a Sunday, that kind of almost like a doom and gloom feeling. And there's ways that we can reset that Sunday feeling, so to have like that joy back again, and maybe prepare for the week ahead in a different way. And so those are some of the things that, I talk about in my workshops, and leaning into just different resources. So I tapped into all kinds of new resources just around how to be more mindful and intentional in the workplace, again, in the context of a school setting, understanding what some of the triggers might be, and how to how to lead without feeling like you're always in crisis mode. And I think the more I engage with principals and have conversations, the more I'm recognizing that this is the mindset that many of us are leading with, that you're always putting out a fire, you're always needing to be there. The principal always has to be there in the middle of every kind of mini scenario, and obviously the major ones you want to not miss, but those things create a lot of the undue stress that I think we can kind of begin to kind of work through. So that's kind of like the calm from the confident framework, that I'm hoping is something that you know, leaders that are not just school leaders will be able to kind of resonate and connect with.
You're not talking to a ghost, but there's something wrong with my system. So
Okay,
I've
that's
tried it. I've tried turning my camera on and off again, but I'm not there.
that's okay.
But I am here. So thank you for talk about calm, confident. You just kept on powering through. I don't know what I would do if I were in your situation.
Oh yeah. Well, you know
That
what?
was really good.
Years of dealing with, you name it. You name the emergency, I've dealt with it. And I think that was kind of actually a bit of an awareness on my part, just from talking to my family, of like, I have dealt with all kinds of, scary emergencies. And now little things were getting me all stressed out in a very disproportionate way. And again, that was another signal to me that something doesn't seem right. Like I I would have a crisis at school, and I would go into extreme calm operational mode, and you would just go. And then after everything is settled, that's when you're like, "Oh my god, what just happened?" And then that's when you just sort of, you know, go into like pure exhaustion. So years of training, right?
Yes.
But then, when I was recently presenting, and one of the one of the principals said to me, she says, "Well, how did you know it was different than just like being stressed out?" And I said, "You'll know. Like things that you would normally have been able to manage and do. It's the little smallest things that just set you off and get you really upset, and you kind of lose your confidence, and you lose the trust in yourself, and you lose the joy in what you're doing, and it just overall just doesn't feel good and doesn't feel right. And the concerning thing for me, and again, this may not just be with school leaders, is that I'm presenting to people that are close to 50 or almost approaching 50, and they don't think that they can last much longer.
Mm.
And yes, I took an early retirement, and I was kind of close. I'm not yet, at my early retirement age. I was a couple of years shy of that. But I worry for the leaders that are feeling this way, and they've got an easy 5, 6, 7 years to go, and they're not really feeling that hope. And,
That's a tough one. That's
yeah.
a tough one to wait that amount of years. Woof. Not easy, not easy. So you have to take action. Uh,
And are you noticing that trend as well, Lee, in your circle of colleagues?
well, I have a lot of acquaintances that are teachers, and I'm not hearing many of them loving. And when I say teachers, I mean like high school, like in the primary and secondary
Mhm.
school level. That's where I'm hearing a lot of issues. And yeah, it's hard to want to stay in that work when you're answering to the community, you're answering to the parents, you're answering to your um, to the ministry and all of the people. So yeah, I definitely hear it's an issue amongst the people in my network. And I just want to share something that you mentioned about not all things can be equal in importance, and I really do believe that. And it's something that I learned through my own therapy is that when if you look at the things in your life and you think of them as rocks, right? Like you have
Right.
different rocks. Like you have you know, your parenting is a rock and your keeping track of your finances is a rock and your
Mhm.
job is a rock and all these are rocks. And then unexpected things happen and then there are more rocks. You just can't have all of the rocks the same size and they can't have the same a meaning to you. Like
Right.
they can't all be the same size.
Right.
You gotta take some of those rocks and turn them into a pebble.
Right. Right.
And even
Agreed.
this happening, right? Like, uh, I thought that my charger was plugged in, but the charger part was plugged in, but the actual adapter to go to the
Right.
charger on the other end was not
Right.
plugged in.
Right. And
And
it's not a catastrophe,
yeah,
right?
it's not a catastrophe, but I was doing some calm swearing, so I'm pretty lucky that you didn't hear the swearing because I was expecting I would have to log back in, but
Yeah.
as soon as my computer turned on, there you were. So,
Right.
there was some calm swearing going on, I won't lie.
That's okay. I mean,
There is there's proof that swearing actually calms you down in the heat of
mhm.
the moment, like, it makes you feel better
Yeah. Oh,
somehow.
yeah.
And I do love a swear word when I'm really feeling like it's too much. Like,
Well,
what is
listen, I got used to, just r like, there were times where I'd be in school with my office manager, when we were doing, like, rolling out tech. Like, there was no children in the school, there was no educators, and there were no parents, there was nobody. So, you're getting really comfortable, like, using your colorful language in the principal's office, and, it was like this, "Oh, okay, there's kids in the school again. Okay, we gotta go
Yeah,
back to you gotta go back to doing business the way we were," right? So, you
exactly.
know, um, there was interesting though, as I reflect, when the pandemic first hit and we were leading schools remotely, I actually was re-energized in the sense of that call to action to be the leader of a community that you know, could make a difference when everyone was just freaking out and no one knew, and school was the only known familiar thing to our families. So we were like that March to June of 2020. I loved the innovation that happened, like flipping to online and like doing things differently and connecting with kids and communities in innovative ways. It was rejuvenating. And even the years leading when schools were opening again, and we were like, again, that call to action to serve, to lead was so rejuvenating. Yet there was so many moving parts. Like you said, there were so many big rocks that
Mm.
you couldn't really, it didn't really seem like any rock could be reduced in size. And that, I think, is what took a toll on families. It took a toll on children. It took a toll on school leaders and educators. And so while we always had, high accountability, we just need to get ourselves back on that path of, what normal feels like again. And it'll
Mhm.
always be a new normal. It's going to take time, but I think those of us that got really, we're leading and like in this journey at the time frame that I found myself in, and all of the kind of um, things that kind of came together at that time that were just unique to that time and context, is what landed me to where I am right now. And I am grateful for that, because I feel like I have a capacity to serve in a different way. Just like you and I have had many conversations, things happen for a reason.
Mhm.
And I'm on a pivot. One of the books that was recommended to me, that I absolutely love, is Pivot Year, and that is my word for the year. My word that I've decided for this year, as opposed to having a New Year's resolution, I have a word, and that word is pivot for me this year. And I'm trusting the pivot that I'm on, and I'm trusting the journey. Um, I've tackled some hard things like learning how to make a website. That was something that I never thought I would be able to do, or learning how to design a logo even, right? So, I've been pushed into challenging myself for new learning, getting out of my comfort zone, tapping into all of the things that I loved as a school leader, like creating content and presenting and collaborating and being creative, that I wasn't actually able to do in the job to the extent that I used to be able to. So now I get to kind of, lead the way I want to lead. And so it happened for a reason, and I'm grateful for it. And I am grateful for my connection with you and all the learning that I've had from our journey together, and continued path ahead of learning. So it's not doom and gloom by any means. It's a journey that I'm hoping will land with, with other school leaders and maybe beyond. And I'm really hoping that I can make a difference, in the health and well-being of high achieving leaders like you and I.
Well, I know you're going to make a huge difference, and you already are. So there you go. So at the end of each of our sessions, we always end with 5 action items that our listeners can consider in the next week, and pick 1 to 3 that you want to work on. And then, you can think about others for the future, but you could maybe give them up to 5 ideas of things that they can work on. And we can hopefully encourage them to share how it's going in future episodes.
Perfect. Okay, so I would say, pay attention to the small and the big ways that you are prioritizing your health and well-being on a daily basis.
Mhm.
I would say, practicing gratitude every day with intention, And I'm going to lead you with a term that I coined through some other leadership work that I was doing. And I call it vitamin me, right? And it was just through conversation, this in conversation with my coach that I was working with, kind of came up with. I said, well, I kind of more resonate with like vitamin me, like. So, vitamin me, what is that? That is the daily habits, routines, and rituals that prioritize me from the start of the day every day. These are things that I do. Then you can create your own vitamin me, and it's a
Mm.
non-negotiable. So, I'll give you an example. Like when I wake up, I'm grateful that I do not have to set my alarm. So that is part of my vitamin me, that I set my alarm. I get myself ready every day for some active, healthy, well-being exercise. It's the routines, being highly routine, like pouring my water, taking my vitamins, making a beautiful cup of tea for myself, um, pouring like a really nice, simple, healthy breakfast, sitting at the table, and starting my day with my journal. And that is what I call my vitamin me, and I practice it each and every day, and it just allows me to start the day with that calm, centered, prioritizing myself each and every day. And so I would invite our listeners, your listeners, to ask, like, what's my vitamin me? And how can I create that each and every day? And I do a kind of a version of my vitamin me at night before I go to bed every day as well. And but just the whole, like, permission to prioritize yourself through those habits, routines, and rituals, I think can make a really big difference.
Wow, that's a great one. I love that. Fantastic.
So I'm gonna check on you, Lee, and I'm gonna ask you, what's your vitamin me?
Oh, well, uh, for me right now, I would say my vitamin me is any day that I'm not working at the school at York, that I always make time to go for a walk.
Mhm.
Always. I mean, obviously I need to for the dog, but I find I get so much out of it. So, I go down to the creek near my home
Mhm.
and I walk through the trail, and it's just it opens up possibilities and
Right.
ideas, and to me that makes a huge difference. It helps me to uh calm down, relax. It gives me my creativity juices, work through problems. So walking is a huge, vitamin me.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and, but I have more on my list. But patience is a vitamin me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And having patience for myself that I will figure out the extra vitamin me's in time. And so, it's just taking one little step towards the direction that I want in my life. So
And you know what? This is going to sound silly, but I've actually created like my calendar, like my Google Calendar, like every single day, like the format and the flow is there. Like it says in my calendar, okay, vitamin me, and then it's
right.
my health and well-being, and then I've got my color coded sections of my day. Like there are times where I'm working on tasks, there's times where I'm working on my brand, and then there's times where I'm social and I'm, whatever. But my day is anchored and it's actually marked in my calendar as such. And so, the level of intention toward the life that I want to create for myself is really significant. And I think the one thing that I think we both want listeners to take away is that, how can you do this while you are working full time and in a busy, demanding leadership role? It can be done. It's going to
Yeah.
be baby steps. It's that confident leadership, that resilience framework. It's small baby steps, and it's one step forward a day at a time. Um, I didn't come up with this idea, but I read it in a book. Like when I get out of bed every morning, my first, you put your left foot down and your right foot down, and it's every day it's thank you, and it's
Mm.
whatever I'm thankful for. And, it's like that small decision every day to get up and start your day with positive intention and a positive mindset. And,
I
it'll
forgot to
shine through in everything that you do.
Exactly, and I forgot to mention another big part of my day is always finding time to meditate,
Mhm.
breathe, practice mindfulness, catching myself if I'm not being mindful, and reminding myself, that if I focus on one thing at a time, it's much more effective
Yep.
for me, and I feel better, I have more energy, I'm less bitchy. So
Yeah.
it's, those things. So those are the two vitamin me's that mean the most to me. And I think walking is a form of mindfulness too. If
Yeah.
you know,
Agreed.
so yeah. So how can people work with you and find more information about you?
Oh, thanks for asking. So I am on LinkedIn. I do
Mhm.
have a website, vinitamongia.com, just my first name, last name.com. And and on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
I would love to be able to connect and collaborate. And if someone's listening and also happens to, have a friend or a colleague or whatever, particularly in the school system, I would really welcome that opportunity. I do feel like principals are struggling, school leaders are struggling, and the impact of a school leader on a greater community is significant. So I'm here to make a difference.
Mhm.
And if my message resonates with non-school leaders, that is the biggest compliment as well, because you just never know where your influence and your messaging and your approach can be of support to others. So LinkedIn and my website.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, I see that we have 5, and I'm sorry that I didn't integrate them into our conversation today. But please do introduce yourself in the LinkedIn chat if you're watching, and if you have any comments or questions that came up from our conversations today, we can certainly answer them and follow up. And yeah, it's meant for post-party networking. So feel free to collaborate and connect with those that you are um, seeing on the live stream. Our next guest next Thursday at 2 p.m. is Ramiz Asani, who will be talking about how to start over in a new country. He is a post grad student at York University, and also a marketing professional and currently working at Humber College. So, really excited to chat with him about his journey and how he found work and got himself settled in Canada. And he's an amazing networker. So, I'm really looking forward to hearing his advice for others. So thank you everyone for joining our Empower Hour. It is we're over an hour, and that's partly because I was popped on and off. But thanks everyone. Don't forget to be the change in the world and the change in yourself. Thanks everyone. It's been a blast.